everyone. I would like to call the Carson City Audit Committee meeting to order. Um, Ms. Munoz, can we have a roll call, please?
Chair Schutte,
Here.
Vice Chair Lambin,
Here.
Member Duke, Member Scalia,
Here.
Member Stack.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Great, thank you. Next on our agenda, public comments. The public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of this public body. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment? Okay. Next agenda for possible action, approval of minutes. Did everyone have an opportunity to read the minutes? And are there any corrections or additions or anything that was missed? Then if I could have someone,
I would move that we accept the minutes from last meeting.
thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second Bonnie Duke.
Great, thank you. Everyone in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, then the minutes are approved. And would it be helpful if we stated our name when you're good? Perfect. All right, thank you. Okay, number 5, meeting item. We will go to 5A for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the monitoring, review, and closure of internal audit findings and/or recommendations included in the audit finding tracking report, and providing a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to close completed findings and/or recommendations. And so, Sherry, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Is microphone working?
Yes.
Okay. It's not as loud as the other one I just used. So I don't have any recommended closures for you today. I have a few updates.
Perfect.
I thought there were going to be a few closures, but we need to push stuff back. The community development audit is the first one. That one has been open since June of 22, and there's a couple items on here still waiting to be closed. There is an update written here as to what's going on, and Hope Sullivan is here if there's any questions. This started as kind of a review of the department and the fact that part of it Charles Abbott does for us. And so it was kind of a decision as to, are we going to keep using Charles Abbott, or are we going to move the process in-house? And there were some findings related to that regarding our system and how we're using our system. And, some people have left from Charles Abbott to fix some things with Charles Abbott. So it has been kind of lingering for a little while, but there are reasons, and we are doing our level best to get this complete. So if there's any questions on that one.
Great, thank you. Yeah, actually, Hope, if you don't mind just sharing some of the updates. I know when I reached out, I appreciated hearing what was happening. So thank you.
Thank you. Hope Sullivan, Community Development Director. If anybody's read Sherry's report and are saying, what's going on in community development? I get it. I'm frustrated too. We have a software system that went live in November 2019. We had a super user who was somebody on our team. She's an employee. She has a full-time job. And she was charged with sort of help and has been asked in her free time to help make the system work. And I think it was last month, I had somebody who's an expert in organizational change come into the department for 4 weeks with one assignment from me: tell me how to make it better. One of the big things she identified was our InterGov system and the challenges that all the employees were articulating to her, challenges that are not being addressed by our super user, possibly because of technical limitations, possibly because of time limitations, possibly something in between. So what I did immediately was find a third party who's an expert in InterGov. We found some money in our budget, and he's assessing our system as we speak. We've already met with him. He's starting I'm interviewing with him tomorrow. He's interviewing people this week and next week. and he will provide what I like to say is a roadmap on how we get from where we are today to an optimal system that will have the portal open at the business license so businesses can apply online and they don't have to physically come into the office or mail things to us. And the system should be able to do this. But some of you may remember we shut down the system when we discovered people were issuing their own business licenses without paying. Planning should have a portal functioning. They're not using it. Building is using a portal. That said, building's using a lot of workarounds because they're having challenges with the system. So that's been a lot. So I'm hoping by bringing in the third party, something was hoping I wouldn't need to do, that we're getting on track to getting this solved. The third party right now will simply tell me what it's going to take to cause the system to work well. He's not actually doing the work. I've asked for money for next fiscal year so that we can implement whatever we need to implement to cause that to be functioning, and we'll have to prioritize based on money. What else? Charles Abbott. Charles Abbott's been with the city since 2014 as our contract building division. We have a 0.5 FTE in that division. Otherwise, it's entirely outsourced. Audrey's on, so Audrey and I, 2022, 2021, Audrey, she called me and said, what do we need to look at? I said, let's look at outsourcing and any risks to the city and outsourcing this function. And I think the audit report that was done in 2022 has some really good recommendations. We have not been in a position to reconsider outsourcing. There's just been a lot going on that to all of a sudden bring this entire division in-house, that's a heavy lift. The current contract is through I think it's September 2026. So probably about 6 months, we're going to have some serious discussions on whether or not we retain that model or we shift to a different model. We also, as part of that, and sorry, I'm sure Sherry's like, you weren't supposed to talk this long. We also are doing a fee study, which will tie into the Charles Abbott piece. The city has not updated or even evaluated our development fees since I've been here, and I've been here 9 years. So what we're doing is we recently put out an RFP. I think we had 7 proposals submitted. We've done reference checks on the one we think we're using, and we'll complete the interviews and get them under contract to analyze our fees. How does that fit into the whole Charles Abbott piece? Because then we look at what the revenues should be versus what they are. And we have a conversation with the board on whether or not we can actually afford to bring it in-house or bring pieces of it in-house. I would expect some type of hybrid, to be honest with you. But we really need to look at where our fees are right now versus where they should be, and then see what the Board of Supervisors would like to do. So hopefully that's responsive. Thank you.
Are there any questions of Hope on this? No, we appreciate the update. Thank you.
The only other one I was going to update you on is the take-home vehicle assessment. This one, unfortunately, is in the review process still. So the policies are done. I believe the departments have done their piece. It's just kind of still being reviewed by, DA and city manager's office. Once it's complete, we'll hopefully bring it back at the next meeting.
And can you tell me what is being reviewed, or is there pushback, or is
Just
there...
changes to the policy, and there's no pushback as far as I understand.
Okay.
It's just a review process.
Okay, just to make sure it's written correctly.
Yeah,
Okay.
and unfortunately with the legislature and budget, it's just a very busy year
You
to
mean
try to
there's
get
not
this
just
stuff
one
done.
thing and everybody...
Yeah,
I know.
no, that would be nice.
All right.
So there's really no action on this because I'm not recommending any closures. So just an update.
Okay. So no questions from anyone? All right. Thank you, Sherry.
You're welcome.
Our next item 5B for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding a report prepared by the Carson City Internal Auditor, Eid Bailey, LLP, for the fiscal year 2024 audit work program concerning the Carson City payroll processing assessment, including findings and recommendations. Sherry, it's all yours again.
Yeah, I think Kathy Villamar, the actual auditor, I think she's going to take us through this.
Awesome. Welcome, Kathy. Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Sherry, and hello, everyone. I will be presenting the results of the payroll processing review, which was identified as an internal audit risk area in the previous risk assessment. The objective of the payroll processing review was to confirm the accuracy and completeness of inputs used in payroll processing. Additionally, to assess the effectiveness of internal controls and procedures in place to prevent errors, fraud, and unauthorized access. The scope of our engagement was from January 1st, 2024 through December 5th, 2024. Our assessment identified 2 findings with accompanying recommendations. Let's see, the first of the 2 findings relates to policies and procedures. The city's payroll policies and procedures currently provide only a high-level overview of payroll processing, lacking detailed guidance on key tasks, roles, and responsibilities. Additionally, while an established payroll processing timeline exists, it is not formally documented. Without comprehensive policies, the city faces risks such as inconsistent payroll practices, reduced accountability, operational inefficiencies, non-compliance, and dependency on key individuals. To address this issue, we recommend that the city expand its policies and procedures to provide detailed guidance on timekeeping, approvals and reconciliations, fraud prevention, and clearly defining roles and responsibilities. A formalized payroll timeline should be documented and made accessible, outlining key deadlines for timesheet submission, approvals, and processing. The payroll checklist should also be revised to incorporate these timelines and align with updated policies. Additionally, a process should be established for regularly reviewing and updating policies to reflect process changes, new regulatory requirements, and system updates. These improvements will enhance standardization, compliance, and overall efficiency in payroll operations. The second finding relates to pay code utilization. The city currently lacks formalized guidelines for pay code usage, which can lead to inconsistencies, errors, errors in employee payments, and benefit miscalculations. Without clear documentation, accountability for pay code application is also difficult to enforce. To address these risks, we recommend that the city develop documentation outlining pay codes, their definitions, and proper usage, including instructions for approval and review. Additionally, the city should conduct periodic reviews to ensure policies remain aligned with regulations and consider system configurations to restrict inappropriate pay code usage. Implementing these measures will improve accuracy, compliance, and overall payroll efficiency. Management is in agreement with the recommendations and provided detailed responses to address the identified risks. That concludes our briefing of the payroll processing review. I want to thank you for this privilege and opportunity for providing this briefing, and at this time, we would also like to express our gratitude to everyone involved in conducting this occasion, the payroll accounting manager, the payroll administrator, and of course, Sherry. Thank you, and I now turn it over to you for questions.
Thank you. Do any members have questions? Okay, we're thinking of.
I just want to update, we didn't have any errors that we found in payroll. I want to highlight that. They're just policy problems, which, yes, we should have a routine policy update every year, and we will absolutely implement that. And then the pay code utilization is a challenging one. We have 9 unions and 2 or 3 employment contracts resolutions, and all of those have their own set of pay codes. So I want to say we have like 300 pay codes in the system. And so putting out a policy that has all these listed out and their specific use would be very confusing. So we typically train the people at the department level who review timesheets what codes they should be using. In fact, ExecuTime, their timesheet, limits the codes. If you're in a certain union, you can only use certain codes. So, so there is a system to make sure they can't charge the wrong code. But we can definitely write up a general guideline as to what code should be used and make that available.
Can you, within the guideline, not only what codes you can use, but the why behind it?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Because some are, personable, some are not. It's complex. So, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
So in departments that have, how are you going to write something for a department that has multiple unions?
That's why we're going to do a general guideline, and it'll probably have to be broken down by union.
Coming from 17 unions in a health services department, I understand your problem.
Right, right. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it'll probably have to be broken down by union. So, and we don't have this right now, so it'll be a brand new policy we'll have to create. It'll take a little bit of time.
Is there just some general codes that regardless of union overall are used? Basic
Well, kind of.
base pay type?
Base pay, yes, but again, that's going to be different for fire, police. So yeah, generally most CCA and unclassified, I think we use 115 as the base pay code. But, fire and police will be a little different because,
Shifts.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be a challenge.
But you find this process will be beneficial?
It'd be nice to send something out to departments that they can use as a reference. I don't think it's a bad idea. We do a training with new people where our payroll person will go out and help them and show them the system and what they need to look for, problems. But it would be good to have a policy to hand to them so they have something to reference. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Okay, so
I would like a motion to accept the report, please.
is there somebody who would like to make a motion to accept the report?
Oh.
All right, is there a second?
I would second.
Great, thank you. Everyone in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, the report is accepted with a unanimous vote. Next, we have agenda item 5C for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding a report prepared by the Carson City Internal Auditor, Ide Bailey, LLP, at the request of the Carson City Firefighter Association, Local 2251 of the International Association of Firefighters, concerning the review of the city's recalculation of the firefighter salaries starting January 1st, 2020, including results of their review. And Sherry, can you get us started, please?
Thank you very much. This, again, like you just read, came about from a union grievance. And, we initially said, okay, hire an auditor. We have auditors come in all the time. That's fine. And they didn't want to hire the auditor. So we compromised and said, okay, we'll recalculate all the salaries. And to make sure, because we're not a third independent party, we did ask Ide Bailey to review our work and make sure they didn't see any discrepancies or anything we were doing incorrectly. So I'm going to turn it over to Brad Lamong to go over what they did and then let you know if they had any findings.
Welcome,
Thanks, Chair,
Brad.
and hi, everyone. Now I'll go over the results of the firefighter study, including an overview of our engagement methodology and approach. So just reiterating what Sherry mentioned, this engagement was initiated at the request of the city to review the accuracy and consistency of the payroll calculations for the fire department. It's important to emphasize that this engagement was not an audit or any form of attestation, but rather a consulting engagement focused on recalculating payroll on a sample basis. Our primary objective was to validate the city's payroll calculations for the fire department on a sample basis using city-provided documentation, which included payroll data exported from their payroll and ERP system units, collective bargaining agreements, a list of key payroll codes used in payroll processing for fire department employees. The scope of our engagement covered payroll transactions from January 1st, 2020 to November 22nd, 2024. For our methodology and approach, it included these following steps. So we first gathered the documentation, which was a listing of fire department employees, their payroll breakdowns, the city's own assessment of fire payroll, collective bargaining agreements, and payroll codes used in payroll processing. For our sampling approach, we randomly selected 14 employees across different roles. And during our recalculation, we validated key payroll components, including pay for merit increases, Fair Labor Standards Act premiums, and overtime. Based on our review, we found no exceptions or discrepancies in the payroll calculations performed by the city. This means that the payroll codes and calculations applied to the sampled employees were aligned with what the city provided for the supporting documentation. So that said, the results of this engagement should not be interpreted as a comprehensive evaluation of the city's payroll processes or controls. And that concludes our briefing on the firefighter study. Thank you for this privilege and opportunity to provide this briefing, and also wanted to express our gratitude to those involved during this engagement, the accounting manager, Jamie, and of course, Sherry. So I'll turn it over to the audit committee to any questions at this time.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Can I take a moment to
Oh,
thank both Brad
please.
and Catherine, because they're both really nice and easy to work with. I really appreciate your help.
Absolutely. Did you have a question?
I did, yes, and I apologize if this was in the last meeting. What is the grievance? What was their concern?
There were a couple errors found that was part of the implementation of Munis.
Mhm.
And so we had to do a retro back. When we did that retro and checking to make sure there were no other errors, we found that a few of the firefighters actually owed us money. And so that was the grievance. They said, that's it. We need to do an audit of the whole, ever since the ERP system, every single firefighter. And so to get the grievance, dealt with, we went ahead and recalculated everybody's payroll for 4 years, which is, I believe, 68 employees.
And in the process of recalculating and then following up with this overview, it was found that the corrections have been made and
Yes.
there are no further problems.
Yes. I think it came out with a couple other little issues, but nothing as big as the initial one. So,
Okay. And those issues are being corrected or have been?
yes, they are being corrected.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I mean, it had to do with the turnover too. They had some turnover in the fire department payroll staff. And so, I mean, there were a lot of reasons for the errors, but
So were the errors on an accounting side, or was it a shared responsibility?
it's a
terms
shared
of different-
responsibility with the fire department, HR, and accounting.
Okay,
So,
all right. Okay,
but we all know where our oopsies are, and it will not happen going forward.
excellent. Are there any questions or concerns about approving this report? Then if we could get a motion or to approve or deny, whatever is your pleasure.
I move to approve the report.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
We have a double dueling seconds. All right. Everyone or all in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, then it's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I was an aye as well. I didn't say anything, sorry. Okay, agenda item 5D for discussion only. Discussion regarding the draft annual risk assessment and internal audit plan for fiscal year 2026. Sherry.
So this is kind of a kickoff as to our fiscal year 2026 internal audit program. So I know Audrey and her team have been working very hard on the risk assessment. They did not have a draft to present today. We thought maybe we could do one as late material, but they did not have a draft. She does have some items to discuss with you through her discussions citywide as ideas for internal audits next year. And then, of course, we want to have a broad discussion from you guys as to what anything you know about that you want to be looked at. So with that, I'm just kind of the middleman, so I'm going to let you guys speak with Audrey.
All right. Welcome, Audrey.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Sherry, and Audit Committee members. I appreciate you all being here. It's a very important topic, and thank you again for your time. Wanted to just let you know a little bit about where we're at with the risk assessment process and what we've been doing up to the date. We have interviewed about 18 department heads, and that included individuals such as the mayor, city manager, assistant city manager, and the external auditor. Along with interviews, we surveyed a handful of departments that we were not able to schedule time with. And I just have to express that everyone has been extremely helpful and responsive with their requests for time and information. As part of the risk assessment update, we also include the status of prior audit recommendations, and we look to assess the risk of those areas and whether or not they have been remediated. So those get dovetailed into the process. And additionally, we have a data gathering exercise that we do, and we obtain things like the board meeting minutes, the city's financial documents, and various activities that were performed by the city and provided to us for review and inclusion. Some of those items include the risk management's list of workers' comp claims, the city's strategic asset management plan, the strategic plan, and the most recent employee survey. From the information that we gathered, we have identified, well over 20 topics, but those that bubble to the top, I'm going to focus on 4, what I would consider the top 4. I'll go ahead and share my screen so you all can see the topics. All right, so the first 2 here that you're seeing are credit card payment security and compliance
And we're
audit.
not seeing it yet.
You're not. Okay, this is what has happened in former briefings.
Oh, it's not working?
Oh, bummer.
Okay. Did you hear that? So it's coming up on the IT screen, but it's not feeding to us. Okay.
Okay.
Then if you can
We'll
just
work to
outline
get
it,
that fixed
please.
for next time.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, so the first one is the credit card payment security and compliance audit. And this one was identified through a multitude of departments, including alternative sentencing. We also had the treasurer's office, Parks and Rec, and of course, community development. The risk that we identified in this area was previous audit findings with PCI noncompliance. And go back a second. Inefficiencies in vendor contracts leading to higher transaction cost and inconsistent credit card processing agreements. There are a multitude of contracting agreements for credit cards. So we would like to assess the effectiveness of vendor compliance, the cost efficiency, PCI compliance, and fraud prevention across the applicable city departments. So I mentioned the city departments where the risk was identified, but it would also include information technology as well. So we're looking at a handful of departments.
Okay, great, thank you. Should we can discuss this now or just wait till
We can have
everything?
comments. I mean, I thought this was a great area because I don't think we've ever looked at it before. I'm not sure if everybody's using the same credit card processors, so it might be good to consolidate if possible and benchmark and find out what other entities are paying for credit card fees and just, streamline the process if possible. And of course, make sure we're compliant.
Make sure we're compliant.
Yes.
Yes. Any other comments? I'm in full support of this as well. And we can go into more detail later, but I am in full compliance. All right, next, please.
Certainly. So the second one is the topic of public safety. And this one would impact or came about from risks from various departments that we spoke with and interviewed, such as Parks and Rec, Health and Human Services, and the Sheriff's Department. And the risk that was identified is around the growing homeless population and public disturbances. The objective is quite long, so I will try and generalize it. But really, it's to evaluate how the city identifies, mitigates, and responds to public safety risk, particularly those that are tied to the homeless population and park safety. The audit will assess the coordination between those three departments, Parks and Rec, Health and Human Services, and the Sheriff's Department to address the public disturbances and ensure the community safety. It will also review the adequacy of park ranger training, safety measures like their surveillance cameras, and strategies to balance public safety with compassionate responses to homelessness. And lastly, we would add in benchmarking, and we would benchmark cities and counties on their approaches and what is working well and potentially what's not working well that we could improve for the city.
Great, thank you.
Any comments?
Does anybody have any comments on this? I do big time on the benchmarking. I think that is very important. I'm part of a team that we meet monthly and we discuss the unhoused and impacts to the city, impacts to businesses, and just what outreach efforts are needed. We discuss overlap, we discuss willingness to accept support, difficulties and barriers to getting on one's feet. And so I think this is quite a timely opportunity. So I appreciate
Yeah.
that it's being brought up.
Agreed. I thought because, ARPA gave us the opportunity to hire Karma Box and do some outreach for the homeless, kind of a look back on what's working, what's not. I know we've had issues having a stable person in Karma Box help us, and so there's been a little turnover there. So, that's kind of what I was hoping for. And then, of course, benchmarking what's working elsewhere versus what we're doing.
And I know our some of our park rangers, they really are in the just they are front facing in this, and especially like at Mills Park, and to ensure that they have the necessary equipment, they have the skills, the training, and that we as a city have a clear understanding of the needs and the best practices. So
Right.
this is great. Okay. All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Next.
All right, so number 3 is focused on the public guardian, and this is also a repeat from last year, but it did come up again. Aside from last year's risk, it was re-identified again this year in various conversations with different departments. So the audit topic would be public guardian compliance and financial oversight audit. The department obviously under review would be the public guardian's office. The risks identified is from last year, it was the public guardian, and it's still to this day a risk, is that they are not part of the treasurer's office surprise cash counts. There has been a new public guardian and new staff, some turnover since last time we were in there, which was a few years ago. And then risk of mismanagement of assets, lack of accountability, legal and regulatory non-compliance, and potential reputational damage and trust. The objective to address the risks would be to assess the effectiveness of financial controls, case management, fiduciary oversight, and ethical compliance within the public guardian's office. The audit would focus on identifying weaknesses in financial management, asset tracking, and workload distribution while ensuring adherence to fiduciary best practices.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments, questions? Yes, go ahead.
Anybody know why they're not part of the surprise cash count?
So they don't really have cash. They deal with about 80 to 90 different wards, and so each of them has a different bank account, but their transactions are check related, and so there's really not any cash handling. They I think that the cash handling procedures of the city are different based on what they do as their wards. So
That is correct.
Yes, and then we do that for the city, but it's not cash of the city. They're cash of each of the wards. It's just a little different. So, but it is a liability, and so
So how, I guess, part of this audit then is figuring out how this is corrected.
it's
But-
not necessarily wrong. We
Uh-huh.
just want to make sure that the controls are in place and that they're handling their finances correctly.
Okay. Are the deposits coming in more timely? I know that that was an issue during the last audit.
Yes. So when they pay on the P card for their wards,
Mhm.
they do reimburse the city timely.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right. And, okay, then the next one, please.
All right, the fourth and
there's
final.
no cash.
Is
Oh,
there-
Nancy was just saying most of their money is also direct deposited into their ward account.
Right,
So there's just not a lot of cash, but
okay.
And this is Todd Reese, Deputy DA. It's not something where we could really bring the ward accounts over to city accounts. I'm not sure, they gotta be,
Yeah.
separate
Right,
accounts that,
right.
they manage as a fiduciary. So I'm not sure exactly how we could,
Right. I mean, they
oversee
use,
that
they use
as the city.
QuickBooks as a software management for each of the wards has a different QuickBooks setup. So, I mean, they have the financial means and ability to track it. We just want to, every now and then have an internal audit go in and make sure everything's still running smoothly, because it is a liability,
right,
they're wards of the city, so.
okay. Thank you. All right, then the next one.
Thank you. Yes, the fourth and final one is titled Staffing and Succession Planning. The departments where this risk was identified was through HR, Human Resources, board meeting minutes, the city manager, Parks and Rec, Health and Human Services, and the public guardian. The risks identified were staffing shortages, seasonal worker turnover, so a lot of turnover with the seasonal parks workers, recent resignation, retirement with city manager and fire chief and public guardian. Not that, we don't have a plan in place, but to ensure that there is a process and that it is documented and we're working towards that. So the objective here would be to review the city's recruitment, retention, and workforce planning strategies to identify those gaps or risks, which we just mentioned, and there might be others. This audit will examine how well the city is addressing staffing shortages in those areas, the effectiveness of onboarding and training programs, and planning for leadership succession. It'll also assess how the seasonal worker turnover is managed and whether there are proactive strategies in place to build a resilient and skilled workforce.
And Audrey, I just want to real quick, I heard excellent news today. The executive office was able to persuade the public guardian to stay. So
good.
we're not gonna lose her. We're gonna retain our public guardian.
That is great news.
Very good news.
Excellent, thank you. Any comments on this? No? All right, I think that one is fairly self-explanatory, and we appreciate that angle, and because we definitely want to be as effective and ensure the process, and when somebody retires, how do we best fill the position? Okay, thank you. So at this point, what do you need from us?
Well, from a discussion point, question for you all is, what do you consider to be the most significant risk or risk currently facing the city?
All right, would somebody like to start, or are there any ideas that you'd like to share?
This is David Lambin, and of the four that you brought up, I particularly feel the public safety, the homeless issue that we have growing, and the fact that it's, oh golly, it's big enough and it's diffuse enough that there's a lot of ways to go wrong. So I like and again, I got a couple of dogs. I do a lot of walking around at night, and the city changes dramatically.
Well, it could be a liability too, they're people, they have rights, so it's it's twofold. It's like you said, it's a vast problem.
Mm-hmm. And it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Absolutely not, yeah.
I think basically 1 through 3, and the credit card thing, that could end up being a real catch-22, but it needs to be looked at. Possible, consolidation. One department handles, like purchasing handles it. You have to go through purchasing or something. 4, I'm going to go on the side of the HR director. Good luck, because unless you have a magic money tree out back, it's going to be real hard. Been there and done that.
And I have repeatedly told people I do not have a money tree.
I know. I've been there and done that on a larger scale. So that's just the times and stuff we live in now. But I think the credit card thing, just from a retired governmental accountant standpoint, that's a biggie. I agree with you on the homeless. But the city changes at 5 o'clock downtown. And the public guardian seems to be kind of this swirl. Keeps coming back up. So I would kind of prioritize those 3 overall. And it's kind of my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, without seeing the rest of the report, all 4 of those are extremely important, and we can all say, hey, I think 1 is better, 2 is better, more important, whatever that may be. But there's a large amount of risk when you start dealing with people. And so that turns into your public safety, that turns into the wards. I mean, you look at like perception is reality. So while internal audits or whatever we've had may not have found any evidence of any issues on the ward side, you still run the risk of that getting out that, oh, Carson City doesn't have anybody who's paying attention to what we're doing for the wards of the city, which is a huge nightmare, media nightmare that nobody wants in this day and age. So if you even remove that piece of it, like they're people, right? Like we want to make sure that the folks that are charged with taking care of these people are doing the right thing. I'm sure they are, but you just want to have that extra, like, we know that this is the right way to go.
And in this case, you're speaking to the public guardian?
I am, yes.
Okay.
I apologize.
Just want to clarify.
Mhm.
Do you have any? No? Okay. I agree. I think the priority of credit card and then the public safety and the public guardian, I think those are the top three. And depending on, and please let me know if you agree, everyone, depending on funding and availability, if there are monies available for even a high level for number 4, the HR, the recommendation, and the staffing. I know that has come up before. And so is everybody comfortable with that? Prioritizing 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Audrey, is that helpful?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, and we appreciate what you're doing. All right. Then agenda item 5E, and this is discussion only, discussion regarding fiscal year 2025 audit work program update and hotline activity. Sherry and I guess Audrey.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Audrey. You're the update on this one.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. The update, I want to just quickly run down all the internal audits and related activities that were on the plan for this year. The first one was the take-home vehicle assessment, which has been completed. The fees were $30,000. The payroll processing, which we just read out, that's completed, fees of $30,000. Firefighter study completed. Fees are absorbed in the related activities, which I'll talk about in a minute. The last internal audit engagement, purchasing and contracts management, we have kicked that off, held our planning meetings and interviews with the key contacts. So that one is in process. We plan to be with you at a meeting in the future when we plan with the data is to have the report for you and have that completed. The fees for that are $35,000. On the related activities that included the firefighter study, we also have this risk assessment that we just spoke about that's in progress. We'll have a report for you in June. We also monitor the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline, which I'll give you an update on that in a minute. And then we also help out with follow-up as needed. That's approximately $15,000 for those categories combined. So to date, we have expended approximately $70,000 of the $110,000 budget. So enough for us to complete the remaining activities in progress. The fraud, waste, and abuse hotline, Sherry, is that a separate agenda item?
No, it's included here.
Okay, great. I have the privilege of saying that there have been no cases that are involving the city from the last time we've met to today. There are cases there, but they are not related to Carson City. And that wraps up the internal audit status. Any questions, comments?
Does anybody have anything? No, I think we're good on that. Thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
we will then go to agenda item 5F, For discussion only, consideration of dates for the next meeting of the Carson City Audit Committee.
So I think to give Audrey time to finish up the audit program for 25 and the final risk assessment and all that, if we could meet sometime in June, maybe the 10th or the 17th. Does that give you enough time, Audrey?
Yes, we'll be prepared to deliver the remaining engagement and risk assessment.
Okay, thank you. Is there a preference between the 10th or the 17th? No?
Well, we'll always take the later one, but it's up to you guys. What works best for you?
Yes. So the 17th then,
All right.
and at 1:30?
Yep.
Perfect.
Same fun time, same great place.
Same bat channel. Okay. And so, our next step, so thank you so much. I think that was productive, and that leads us to 6 on the agenda, public comments. Once again, the public is invited to share any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment? No? Okay. Well then, we will adjourn, and thank you, everyone, and we'll see you all on June 17th. Yay,
Thank you very much.
thank you, all right.